My husband used to torment me because, according to him, I didn't let him enjoy his youth and open our marriage. Now, he regrets it because I'm enjoying myself much more than he is. We met at university and got married a few years later. He was the typical school nerd, with big glasses and a skinny frame. We met through mutual friends and grew closer because I helped him escape from his bullies. People used to say I had a sharp tongue, and his aggressors always backed off when they saw me with him. I told him he needed to change his style and take better care of himself physically, as it would help him. He used to say I changed his life and began courting me. At first, I was resistant, but I thought he was overall a good guy and I had nothing to lose by giving it a try. He was my first in everything, and he proposed to me right after graduation. I told him I wanted to have 3 children. That was my dream. But he replied that he didn't want kids because he hated children and thought they were too expensive. 6 years into the marriage, he always seemed lost in thought. When I asked, he'd say it was just exhaustion. Until one night, while I was making dinner, he confessed that he regretted not exploring single life since we'd been together since college. He had only had 2 partners before me. I was his only partner, and that was enough for me. It didn't take long before he jokingly suggested an open marriage, saying that's what everyone was doing these days. I said no. I started to wonder if I wasn't attractive enough, fun enough in bed, or if he was simply bored with me, even though I gave him all the space he needed. I had always accepted all his fantasies in the past. I worked out religiously, doing weight training and yoga, followed a healthy diet, and was in great shape. I always planned at least 2 romantic dates a month and participated in his hobbies whenever he asked. Even though I wasn't interested in motorsports or shooting practice, I indulged him. Yet he insisted that I wasn't letting him enjoy his youth while he still could. Eventually, he broke me. In tears, my face falling apart, I felt like I was ruining his life. So reluctantly, I agreed. We set a don't ask, don't tell policy. He was happy, hugged me, and said I was the best wife in the world. When it all started, I didn't participate. I couldn't imagine being with anyone other than my husband. I kept living as I had before, but he began going out more for nights with friends, to bars, and was always on dating apps on his phone. I admit it hurt me. Finally, I decided to try dating sites because I spent too many Friday nights alone at home. I decided to give it a shot. That night, I dressed without much enthusiasm. A simple dress, light makeup. I wasn't excited about the idea of going to a bar, but the loneliness at home was suffocating me. My husband was out again, probably on a date he'd never have the courage to admit. The bar was small, the music far too loud for my taste. I sat in a corner, ordering a drink just to appear occupied. I observed the people around me. Over-the-top laughter, persistent stares, conversations that seemed hollow. When someone finally approached me, it was exactly the kind of interaction I dreaded. A man with alcohol on his breath and a forced smile. He tried a lame joke and asked if I was alone. I politely answered yes, but said I was just relaxing. He insisted, making comments about my appearance and trying to touch my hand. I made up an excuse and moved to another corner of the bar. The night went on like that. Idiotic people, uninteresting conversations. At some point, I looked at the clock and decided I'd had enough. I left feeling worse than when I arrived. Was this what my husband found so exciting? I went home, took a long shower, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The emptiness was crushing. The following week, I decided to try something different. I had always loved reading but had neglected it in recent times. I decided to visit the city library. It was a quiet place with tall shelves and the comforting smell of old books. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books, choosing one at random. I sat in a comfortable armchair and immersed myself in reading. That's when I saw him for the first time. He was in the literature section, flipping through a book with great focus. He was young but had a mature posture, discreet glasses, and a gentle smile as he read. I couldn't help but take a longer look. He noticed, smiled, and made a comment about the book I was holding. We started talking. I learned his name was Gabriel, and that he loved books as much as I did. He was intelligent, had a subtle sense of humor, and spoke in a way that made me want to keep listening. From that day on, I started going to the library more often. Sometimes he was there. Other times, we ran into each other by chance at a nearby cafe. Our conversations revolved around books, movies, and life. He had a way of making me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Little by little, I allowed myself to smile more, to feel lighter. It wasn't physical, not yet, but I felt a connection that went beyond that. My husband, on the other hand, began to notice my change in behavior. He started asking questions he hadn't asked before, seemed more attentive, but he still kept up his regular outings. Then one day, he came home earlier than expected and found me leaving to meet Gabriel at a cafe. I didn't lie. I told him I was getting to know someone. He exploded. He said that wasn't part of the deal, that the open marriage wasn't for me to see other people, but for him to have his freedom. I stood there, incredulous at what I was hearing. After everything, now he cared? I tried to explain that for the first time in months, I felt alive again. He yelled that he wanted to close the relationship, that he wouldn't allow me to continue with this. I looked at him calmly, but firmly. I said no. I had agreed to his request, even though it hurt me, and he had no right to try to control my life now. He insisted, begged, and tried to convince me our marriage could still be saved. I smiled, but it was a sad smile. You had your chance, I replied. I gave my all, tried everything to make this work. When I was suffering, you were living your freedom. Now it's my turn. I'm not giving this up. He was silent, visibly shaken. For the first time, I realized he was no longer in control. I was. That night, I left home and went to meet Gabriel. I knew my marriage was over, but for the first time in years, I felt I was on the right path to finding something that truly made me happy. After the confrontation with my husband, something inside me changed. I no longer saw him as the man I once loved, but as a selfish stranger who cared only about himself. I started going out with Gabriel more often. Our dates were lighthearted, filled with meaningful conversations and genuine laughter. He made me feel special in a way I hadn't felt in years. My husband noticed my coldness, but instead of trying to resolve things maturely, he became irritated. The argument started small, with him questioning where I was or why I was distant. I answered calmly, without hiding the truth. This irritated him even more. He began shouting at me, demanding explanations. It didn't take long before he lost control, accusing me of being responsible for the destruction of our marriage. The irony of hearing this from him, considering he was the one who initiated everything with his request for an open marriage, was not lost on me. I no longer felt fear or guilt, just exhaustion. Every word he said convinced me further that I was right to move on. It made no sense to stay in a relationship where I wasn't valued. Then one day, he had a fit of rage because I came home late from a dinner with Gabriel. He screamed, accusing me of being selfish and ruining everything. I stayed silent, listening to his words without emotion. When he finished, I simply said, "I'm leaving." He was stunned. He asked what I meant by that. I took a deep breath and continued, "I want a divorce. I'm not going to stay here pretending there's anything left between us. You had the freedom you wanted, and I found mine. It's over." He tried to argue, yell, even cry, but I didn't give in. I packed some clothes, took my essentials, and left the house that very night. I went straight to Gabriel's place. He welcomed me without asking questions, simply opened his arms and hugged me. At that moment, I knew I was making the right decision. Over the following weeks, I filed for divorce. My lawyer explained that I was entitled to half of what my ex-husband owned. I thought long and hard about it. Part of me wanted to just leave without looking back, but another part, the hurt and betrayed part, knew I deserved what was rightfully mine. He had opened my eyes to the fact that I was never truly loved by him, so there was no reason to feel compassion now. When my ex learned that I was claiming my share, he was furious. He tried to convince me it was unfair, that he had sacrificed so much to build our life together. For the first time in years, I laughed in his face. Sacrificed? You were busy living your freedom while I was doing everything to keep this marriage together. I'm not giving up what's rightfully mine. The divorce was tough, but in the end I got half of everything he had. I used that money to start over. Gabriel and I decided to try a serious relationship, but without rushing. He supported me in every decision, never pressuring me. Together, we rented a small apartment, decorated simply but full of life and joy. Today, I look back and see how much I've grown. I live happily with Gabriel in a relationship where I am loved and valued. My ex-husband? I don't know much about him, but I hope he's learned something from all this. I know I have. I'll never again accept less than I deserve. And for the first time in years, I'm truly at peace. The months that followed the divorce were a true transformation for me. It wasn't an easy process, but each day took me further from the weight of the past and closer to a future that seemed much more promising. Gabriel was a constant during this time. He never pressured me, never tried to take a space that wasn't his, but he was always there, supporting me and celebrating every small victory as I worked to rebuild my life. Our relationship evolved naturally. At first, we were just companions who understood each other deeply, but little by little, I realized there was something much greater between us. Gabriel was unlike anyone I'd ever known. He not only made me feel loved, but also admired, respected, and desired in a way I had never experienced before. With him, I could be myself without fear of judgment. One day, while we were at a park, sitting on the grass and talking about books, he said something that echoed in my mind. With that calm smile I loved so much, he said, "You know you're the most amazing person I've ever met, right? I feel like what we have here is something I want to keep forever." Those words struck me deeply. They weren't empty promises or exaggerated declarations. They were sincere, straight from the heart. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that Gabriel was the man I wanted to spend my life with. Some time later, we decided to take an even bigger step and bought a house together. It was a cozy place with a small garden where he promised to plant the flowers I liked. We spent entire afternoons decorating every corner, choosing furniture and painting walls. That house wasn't just a physical space. It was the materialization of our new beginning. During this period, something unexpected happened. I started feeling strange, tired, with morning sickness I couldn't explain. At first, I thought it was stress or maybe something related to our busy routine. But after a few weeks, Gabriel insisted I see a doctor. I remember that day perfectly. I was sitting in the waiting room, nervous, while Gabriel held my hand. When the doctor came in with the results, he smiled before saying, "Congratulations, you're pregnant." For a few seconds, I was in shock, unable to process the information. Gabriel squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with emotion. When I finally understood what it meant, a wave of happiness washed over me. I was going to be a mother. We were going to be parents. The news brought a new energy into our lives. Gabriel seemed even more in love, taking care of every detail to ensure I was okay. He started reading books about parenting, insisted on accompanying me to every doctor's appointment, and even began learning to cook healthy meals for me. As for me, I felt like I was being reborn. Being pregnant was something I had always wanted, but for so long it had seemed like an impossible dream. Now, with Gabriel by my side, that dream was becoming a reality. Every movement of the baby, every beat of that little heart we heard in the ultrasounds was confirmation that I was on the right path. My ex-husband, at this point, was nothing more than a distant shadow in my past. There was no anger or resentment, just indifference. He had been part of a phase in my life that was now completely closed. My focus was on the present and the future. When the day of the birth finally came, Gabriel was by my side the entire time. He held my hand, encouraged me, and when our child was born, he cried upon seeing him for the first time. Watching him hold our baby with so much love was the most beautiful moment of my life. Now, as I rock our little one in the room we decorated together, I think about how unpredictable life can be. Not long ago, I was lost, trapped in a relationship that consumed me. Today, I have a family, a home, and a vision for growth with someone I truly love. Gabriel and I aren't perfect, but we complement each other in a way that gives me hope for the future. Finally, I feel like everything has fallen into place. The past has stayed where it belongs, And the present has brought me something I never imagined, true happiness. And as I watch Gabriel sing to our sleeping child, I know I am exactly where I'm meant to be.